Anda masih menyaksikan Manufaktur Check kali ini bersama saya Shinta Zahara. Industri manufaktur dan jasa secara global memang sedang mencatatkan kinerja yang melambat. Terlebih, suramnya prospek ekonomi global belum menunjukkan titik akhir. Inflasi dan suku bunga yang meninggi masih menjadi momok mengerikan saat ini sehingga memberikan tekanan terhadap prospek ekonomi global, sektor manufaktur, serta jasa secara global yang ikut terimbas oleh kondisi tersebut. Ada banyak negara yang mengalami kontraksi pada Purchasing Managers Index, beberapa yang menjadi sorotan diantaranya Amerika, Eropa, China, dan juga Jepang. Biro Statistik Nasional China mencatat PMI manufaktur China mencapai 49,2 pada bulan April, turun 2,7 poin indeks dari bulan lalu, yakni di angka 51,9 bulan Maret. Dari Amerika Serikat, aktivitas manufaktur kembali mengalami kontraksi pada Maret yang memperpanjang kontraksi beruntun menjadi 4 bulan. Sementara zona Eropa PMI untuk sektor manufaktur telah terkontraksi 9 bulan beruntun. Pada Februari, PMI zona Eropa tercatat sebesar 48,5 yang artinya masih berada di zona kontraksi. Permintaan jatuh hampir di seluruh sektor barang, mulai dari barang konsumsi, barang investasi, hingga barang setengah jadi. China, Jepang, Amerika, dan Eropa merupakan negara mitra dagang Indonesia. Jika kondisi manufaktur negara ini sedang loyo, tentunya akan berpengaruh ke Indonesia. Lantas seberapa besar pengaruhnya? Apakah Indonesia perlu siaga satu? Kita akan cari tahu jawabannya bersama Shan Saeed, Chief Economist Juwai IQI, Malaysia. Okay, Shan. So the global manufacturing and service industries are currently recording a slowing performance. So what is the biggest factor that caused this?
If you see in the last 2 years or so, COVID has played a bigger part in keeping many advanced economies on the slower side. Moreover, the war in Ukraine and Russia has played havoc with the global supply chain. Global recession is very much on the cards. 60% of the global economy is in stagflation, 25% is in recession, and 10% of the global economy is on the verge of sovereign debt crisis. So all in all, it creates a huge drag on the global economy. And we have seen markets are in a very bad mood. We have seen ructions in the market not seen for a decade. And this has continued to create havoc for many economies, and it has been a huge impact on the manufacturing as well.
Okay, Sean, there are many countries that are experiencing contractions in the Purchasing Manager Index, some of which are in the spotlight, including America, Europe, China, and Japan. So how this affect the developed country and developing countries?
I think it will have more impact on the advanced economies. The pivot of growth has moved towards 3 regions. If you pick up the last year's Economist issue, September, they mention about 3 regions where growth will happen for the next 3 to 5 years. They talked about ASEAN, they talked about GCC, that is Middle East, and Africa. And most of the advanced economies like Japan, UK, Europe, and US will witness a slowdown. So in the next 3 to 5 years, either many economies will have zero growth or they will have negative growth. So I think, yes, it will have a huge impact. But on the other hand side, the developing countries or the ASEAN or the GCC or the African region, they will continue to move on the upsurge because of one factor, macroeconomic stability. What is macroeconomic stability? It comprises the political, economic, and financial stability. In the last 6 months, we have seen banks, especially in US, they are in turmoil. But we have not seen any crisis in ASEAN region or in GCC or in Africa. So I think investors' confidence is where growth stability is tantamount to consumption and strong investment outlook. So those sophisticated and smart investors, they look at macroeconomic stability, they look at growth stability, and most importantly, they look at the government policies. If the governments are consistent in the policies, they have given a policy framework, and wherever they have confidence in the economy, investors would like to move in those regions.
Okay, but how do you see the growth of economy in Asian region?
We at Juwai IQI, we have already shared in a newsletter which publishes on monthly basis that we expect ASEAN to have a very noticeable and remarkable growth led by Vietnam between 7 to 8%, Malaysia 4.5 and 5.5%, Indonesia 4 and 5%, same goes for Philippines, Thailand between 3 and 4%, and Singapore around 2 or 2.5%. So I think the main premise is based on macroeconomic stability, growth stability, most importantly, infrastructure investment. ASEAN requires $1.2 trillion of infrastructure investment. Indonesia requires $400 billion of infrastructure investment. And what President Jokowi has done, which is mentioned in last month's Economist issue, that President Jokowi, under the leadership of President Jokowi, they have built 18 ports, 21 airports, and 1,700 kilometers of railroad. So that gives a clear advantage not only to Indonesia, but to other ASEAN countries. And as you know, infrastructure investment has direct correlation with GDP growth. So what ASEAN is doing is a clear example, and it clearly illustrates that leaders of ASEAN, they are cognizant of the fact that infrastructure investment, having macroeconomic stability, are the key components and vital for the growth outlook in the years to come.
So, Shan, you are still quite optimistic about economic growth in Asian countries, and especially maybe for Indonesia.
Yes, absolutely. As you have seen, Indonesia growth for the first quarter has hit over 5%. We have already mentioned that Indonesia will be one of the leading economies by 2030, the fifth largest economy of the world, based on the premise that economy is moving at a very fast pace. In the March issue of Economist magazine, President Jokowi has clearly given a specific task to all the diplomats of Indonesia working abroad that they have to focus on exports, FDI, and tourism. And rightly so, because these are the three contributing factors that brings macroeconomic stability, it brings confidence in the economy, and most importantly, it reflects a very positive signal to global investors. So I think all in all, Indonesian economy right now is $1.4 trillion, which is roughly the size of Austria, Belgium, Finland, and Luxembourg in Europe. And the Indonesian economy and the GDP size will continue to grow in the next 3 to 5 years.
Okay, Shan, in recent times, Indonesia's labor-intensive industries have been laying off many jobs. Does the declining manufacturing conditions of Indonesia's export destination countries also affect this?
I would say it's a short-term move. Yes, layoffs are happening globally. Most of the layoffs are happening in the tech industry. But in ASEAN or in developing countries or in GCC or in Africa, I have not witnessed so much of layoffs. So it could be a short-term move, but overall, I think with more and more FDI and global investors relocating their position in Indonesia. And if you pick up last month's issue of Economist magazine, since I follow Economist magazine, so I can quote from there, Indonesian industrial policy of downstreaming, focusing on commodities. So those countries that are rich in commodities like oil, natural gas, rubber, palm oil. Indonesia is the leader, number one in palm oil. They will have huge advantage over those countries which don't have commodities. And most of those global investors, they are interested in nickel, they are interested in oil, they're interested in rubber, cocoa, and natural gas. And Indonesia has got huge deposits of all these resources. So President Jokowi's strategic policy of downstreaming has paid dividends. And this has benefited Indonesia not only in the short run, but in my opinion, I foresee Indonesia is going to benefit in the long run as well.
Okay, Shan, we see that European zone, the PMI for the manufacturing sector has contracted for 9 months in a row. In February, the European zone PMI was recorded at 48.5, which means it's still in the contraction zone. What are the current needs of society? Is war in Russia and Ukraine changed the demand of the society?
Yes, you have rightly pointed out that war in Ukraine and Russia has been a huge drag on European zone, and it will continue to create havoc. So, which is bad for European Union. And overall, I think the inflation rate is pretty high. There have been experts who have been saying that European economy will become 1/3 of the global economy in the next 3 to 5 years because they don't have macroeconomic stability. Confidence level is pretty low, and overall, the GDP outlook is quite dismal. So I think, in my opinion, Europe will continue to have high inflation. They will have low FDI, and they will continue to have subpar GDP growth for the next 2 to 3 years. That makes investors' confidence pretty low in the European Union.
Well, it's truly an informative dialogue. Thank you for your time, Shan Saeed, Chief Economist Juwai IQI Malaysia. It's very insightful. See you next time. Have a good day.